and I am with Softvision for the past 4 years. Really excited to talk about application architecture. I request all of you to post your questions on the chat module so that I can answer them accordingly. Let's get started with application architecture. Application architecture provides a roadmap and the best practices to build any software application. Application architecture provides a great foundation for the success of any application to be built upon. It is the most important phase of an application. Any decision that is being taken impacts the overall ability of an application. The application architect should envision from the very big picture of an application till very minute implementation of an application. Let's see what does application architecture provides. Application architecture provides business functional analysis, implementation architecture, the tools and technologies that has to be used to implement the software, and how the data will be architected or stored, flowed in order to present them in a way that the user can accommodate it, use it, and also it provides the details of all non-functional requirements. I will dig deeper on what is non-functional requirements and also about deployment architecture, how we are going to deploy and make it live for all the users. Application architect also ensures not only these aspects of an architecture, he also ensures is the application scalable, reliable all the time, and is being available to the users all the time. And application architect should also ensure that the future accommodating all kinds of functionalities that the software expects in the future, and also the competency for this application. Application architect will have the skills of modularization, distribution, integration, implementation, high availability, and different scalability patterns. And he also will have the strong knowledge of emerging technology and trends. So how do an application architect gives a best strategies and provides a great foundation and give all the guidelines to every stakeholder, starting from business team, business users, developers, DevOps, and the end users? How does he provides all the perfect guidelines at the very early phase of an application architecture? Let's dig a little bit more deep into how does he provides it. He provides it in the form of application modeling. So the entire model of an application, be it business, functional, implementation, tools, everything, he will be creating a different models for different phases. So, and putting them all together gives them a overall picture to all the stakeholders. It helps all the stakeholders to improve predictability, reduce risk, and cost. The second point is about technology processes. The process we choose makes the application more and more efficient. The appropriate choice of the technology processes and the strategies, like whether it is a agile or waterfall method that appropriately suits the software application, will enable the success of implementation of the software application. It also promotes competitive advantage. Choosing the appropriate process and strategy makes the team, whoever is implementing the application, face the competition and give the best results to the business users. And it creates a lot of efficiency, and it adds a lot of value to the business team as well. And technology standards. The appropriate choice of technology accommodates all the functionalities that has to be incorporated in the application. It helps everybody to accommodate any kind of business requirements. So application architecture provides a strong technology standard such that the whole stakeholders can accommodate any kind of business functionalities into the application. Then let's see each and every phase what an architecture application architect product provides. And the first stage is about application architect functional analysis, business functional analysis. Architect will group with business team and business user team, and then have a iterative meetings and collect all the complete business functionalities list that has to be accommodated into the application. Along with it, he digs deeper into each and every business functionality that has to be incorporated into the software application. It enables everyone to view the performance, to view the purpose of each and every functionality in the complete application. It provides everyone a bigger picture of the application that is being given to the users. It also provides traceability of each and every functionality, and also the total functionality implementations and any feedback from the business team, business users, developers, and even from the end users, we could accommodate at the very early phase of an application itself. And it is the very critical phase of application architecture, as collecting business requirements is the main thing for a application success. Then after we decide what are the business functionalities that has to be implemented in an application, and we know what has to be implemented in each and every business functionality, then an application architect will look about what are the patterns that can be used to build that business components. A pattern is nothing but building reusable blocks of a functionality such that we can use it anywhere. So, and there are multiple architectural patterns, implementation patterns of an application. The well-known application architecture patterns are single tier, thick client, desktop applications, client server, or two tier and three tier, three-layer model like UI layer, business layer, followed by database layer, DAO, data access layer. So very famous, and which is micro front ends, which is like the emerging application architecture that is coming in: message bus, MVC, model view controller architecture, event driven architecture, microservices architecture, RESTful services architecture, service oriented application architecture, modular architecture, or ETLs. Application architect will choose, if the service has to be used in multiple places, then he would go for microservices. And it has to, and if it is an application where REST APIs is being needed and then has to be consumed by different stakeholders, then he would be going for RESTful services pattern. That's how the application architecture patterns are being defined at the very early stage, and is very, very critical, such that the future functionalities that are coming up in, and the competencies, everything will depend upon the pattern we have chosen, and how much we are able to accommodate business requirements for the business users in the future. Then he would go ahead, after deciding the patterns, after deciding the business technologies, then he would go for different tools and technologies that has to be used to implement the application. So, so few of the examples of different tools and technologies: development IDEs for the development team. He would be providing guidelines like what kind of a tools they can use, like Visual Studio Code, either it can be Eclipse, STS, IntelliJ, Visual Studio Code, and so on. And then followed by the technologies. The technologies could be anything like Angular, React, Node, Mongo, Java, .NET, Postgre, blockchain, artificial intelligence, machine learning, IoT, and follows by. And then Once he gives the developer guidelines, testing guidelines, technologies guidelines, then he would be providing the guidelines on how would we manage our code versioning, and then how would we, as and when we implement, how would we deploy the code. For that, he will provide the guidelines for continuous integration and continuous deployment guidelines, like they can use Git, GitLab, Jenkins, and so on. Then the most important thing, like issue trackers, like whether we have implemented all the business functionalities as it is expected by the business users, and it is being the mediator for business users, business team, business analysts, and developers, testers, and the end users. So for that we can use, he would be providing guidelines on whether we could use Jira, CDEX, and different issue trackers. And then finally, in order for us to provide the application to the end users, we have to deploy our application. He would even be providing the guidelines of that at the first stage of the application architecture itself, like whether we could use Docker or Google Cloud Platform, Amazon Web Services, and so on. Then followed by that, how the data will be organized in an application. So data plays a major role in any application implementation. So in the data architecture, he would be providing how the models, policies, and rules to place the data in the database, how the data will be collected, how it is stored, arranged, integrated, such that it provides a criteria and a process to foresee how the data flows, and how the data flows inside the database, and from there how would the business layer team and UI team will read the data or put the data into the data systems. And data, how does he provide data architecture guidelines? Data architect will be providing data architecture guidelines in the form of a data models. So he will be, how he will be designing the data models. First, he will be identifying what are all the different identities that I can use to accommodate all the data that is being required by the business team. And then he will be identifying each and every key for each and every entity, and draw a draft of entity relationship model. And then he defines attributes for each and every data entity. So he would be providing the complete data model before even we start doing anything with the application. And everybody, all the stakeholders are very clear about how we are going to manage the data by seeing these data models. Then followed by application architecture, non-functional methodologies, and defining the business functionalities, defining the implementation tools, implementation patterns. Data architecture will not suffice the overall implementation of an application. Application architect will also illustrate about how do we manage different non-functional requirements. These are not functional requirements that are being provided by the business team or the business users, but we have to accommodate all of these functionalities to make sure that the application is performing, scalable, and very secure. So in these non-functional requirements guidelines, we would be providing details, architecture guidelines about how would we do catching at different layers of application, be it front end, back end, and at the data layer, session management, state management, everything. And then followed by how do we go about security at each and every layer, be it like how do we secure our data, how do we secure UI, how do we secure all the business APIs, how do we secure all microservices, be it depending upon the architecture chosen. He would be providing security guidelines and what we are going to implement about the security related to the application. Followed by the performance, like as architect architecture is being given for all the aspects of an application, and we could see them we could foresee them, how we can reconnect, how we can arrange them, how we can store them, how we can make the flows. So and so he could application architect provides the best performance guidelines to make the application perform in the best possible way. And also, how do we go when the application down, when the software is down, hardware is down, how do we go about that exception management? And then in case of after we deploy the application, how do we go supporting the users when they report the issues, different logging mechanisms, and then configuration management. So this is also one of the important guidelines that has to be provided by an application architect. As in, when we give more and more preferences to configuration management, all kind of change requests can be accommodated easily, be it any layer, even in the database, even in the business layer, even in the front end. It would be very comfortable for the maintenance team, for the long life of an application. Configuration management enables all the stakeholders to perform and make the application more and more efficient and useful. And validations and workflows plays a major role for the application success. So I mean, we have to tighten our screws, I mean, validate and implement the workflows so thoroughly, such that the application is very stable in the when we are delivering it for the first time to the users itself. Like, you know, he would be providing many guidelines to foresee different failure scenarios and success scenarios, and provide all kinds of validations. Then once all these has been defined, and then we are all ready to implement all the business functionalities and business needs, as well as competencies, as well as non-functional requirements, testing strategies, everything. Then then he would also be providing about how would we go about deploying our application, how are we going to make it. Once we implement the whole application, how will we make it available, at which place we are going to deploy our code, whether we are going to make it live, or be it a single application, or we are going to deploy it in a simple Linux server, or we are going to deploy our application in a Docker node or a cloud environment, or and how much CPU, how much memory is needed to deploy these applications, what are the different storage devices, what are different hardwares needed, network devices needed, and all the statistics and guidelines will be provided at the deployment architecture guideline. And he will be deeply defining each and every software component, be it UI, be it business, be it database, be it DAO, be it blockchain, anything. How would we go about deploying each and every component of an application too? Then he would be providing guidelines about integration architecture. How are we going to, as we defined all the things that is needed to provide an application to end user from the business team, then he would another advantage of defining application architecture is it would provide us a very big view of all the components and how they are getting integrated. Not only that, it also enables us to foresee, to view what are the different upstream and downstream applications that are getting connected overall 360 degrees around my application, such that he can provide a guidelines on how would you interact with the other applications, how would you read the data from them, provide the data from them, what kind of integration technologies that has to be used. It could be ETL, I mean, just take the data, extract it, and use some kind of Informatica or different tools and get the data from the other applications and use it in our application, or provide our data from the database and give some APIs and provide it to other applications. So he would be providing, he would be giving a overall view way of where our application sits in a whole business picture, as well as how to interact with them as well. So let's see what are the current application architecture emerging trends. The first emerging trend is being vendor and technology neutral. So definitely every technology will come with its own limitations, but change is the only thing that is constant. So industry is going towards vendor and technology neutral thing. That means we have an application, even in a front end, they are coming up with an architecture that supports micro front end. Like, one component we can develop with Angular, one component we can develop with React, one component we can develop with .NET, such that we are not even depending so much on the implementation developers as well. And architect or developers have the testers have the complete freedom to pick any technology that accommodates any kind of application and what they decide to accommodate. And the second emerging thing is connecting three tech personas. About the three tech personas that are really important for any software application success are architect, developer, and DevOps team, aligning at each and every phase of an application, even at the early stage of an application, such that such that we can take the feedbacks of all overall team and then accommodate all the functionalities in a more efficient way. And the third emerging thing that is coming up is iterative. So change is the only thing that is constant in the world. So even the architecture, the architecture is being given a flexibility to improve based upon the feedback that is being given at each and every level, be it at the implementation phase, be it at the enhancements phase, be it at the support phase. Everywhere architecture is being given flexibility to accommodate any kind of change requests, which provides more efficiency, more productivity, and more business functionalities that can be accommodated into the architecture. Then let's see in a snippet form, like what we have discussed till now in a overall view. So first, what will an architect do? Architect will connect with the business team and the business users, and he defines business functionalities of an application and dig deeply into each and every business functionality that is being required, and he defines each functionality in a very detailed way. And it is the most early and critical phase of an application. And the target will be, the end output will be detailed business functionalities list and a deep view of each and every functionality and a business model. And how would he achieve it? He would be achieving it with continuous iterative interactive meetings between architect and the business team. Once he defined the business functionalities and each and every business functionality, he would be interacting with the developers, and at this phase he will be defining the technologies, tools, services, and different patterns to be used in implementation of an application. And it will be done very early ahead of at the architecture phase itself, but these guidelines will be used in the implementation phase. And the target what developers provide is the complete software application that can be used in an individual system. And how would an architect give all these strategic guidelines? Again, he will be interacting with and discussing a thorough iterative meetings between an architect and the development, followed by the DevOps team, so he will be providing the development architecture guidelines, and these architecture guidelines will be provided at the early phase of application, where architect provides application architect guidelines, but the guidelines that is being defined by an architect will be used at the time of deployment phase. And what would we get? An app completely deployed and the end users can use it straight away. and what is the process involved to make DevOps guidelines. Architect will be defining the guidelines, and then he would be discussing those guidelines with iterative and definitive interactive meetings between architect and the DevOps team. Then followed by, and then what does how, as application architecture is a very early phase and it is the most important phase for a software application success. So what and all an application architect first skill, a major skill should be, he should be able to view the application from a very high bird's view, such that he would be able to draft all the models of an application, and also he would be able to foresee what are the future requirements that could come in, what are the competency standards, how would we connect this application with the other integrated applications that is being required. And as it is the very critical phase, every decision of the application should be taken with complete clarity and facts. That's it. I'm done. Thank you. Any questions? Jayashree?
Thank you, Bhanu. We'll give it a couple of minutes so people can post in their questions. I guess we don't have any further questions. Thank you, Bhanu.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jayashree, and thank you. Bye.